About 3 months after we got married, Amy got saved. I did what any good Christian or a good atheist would do when faced with a Christian. I persecuted her, right? I mocked
Wow.
her. I thought she was crazy. And he comes out with his phone in his hand and he turns it around and shows me. And it had my wife's contact information on it.
Wow.
And they said, you've got to pay us some more money or we're going to call your wife. The footsteps coming down the stairs, down the hall, and she, burst into the room and says, are you cheating on me? I really was more sorry that I got caught than being sorry about the things I was doing,
Hey, we can change the world. Let's go. We can do it. Matter of fact, we will. Yes, sir. This world bleeding in my God can heal. Yes, sir. Every time when I'm out in the field, the heartbeat from the people saying, "Oh, so real." Let's go. Man, we can change the world. We can. Got to do it for the boys and girls. The future. God has a sentence for your life. What's that? He sends you out to spread light. So we can change the world. Yes, sir. We can change the world. We will. We can change the world. Yeah. We can change the world. That's right. We can change the world. We will. We can change the world. Yes, sir. We can change the world. Hey, we can change the world. Let's go.
Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Tell Me Your Story right here on Testimony House, where we share the story inside of God's people out in the world. I'm excited to share with you Neil Getzlow. He has a testimony of overcoming sexual sin. He had some pornography addiction. He also had a prostitute blackmail him and to tell his wife, which led him on a journey and a path to get saved during the pandemic. Quite a testimony we're about to hear. I haven't yet heard a testimony of someone getting saved during the pandemic yet, at least here on this show. And I'm excited to share it with you today because I want you to know that God can come up and show up wherever, whenever, no matter what's going on in the world. So let's invite Neil to the program. Neil, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so blessed to be able to share my testimony with you and the folks out there watching.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to hear it, and I want to jump right into the deep end of this pool. You share that you're a Jewish by religion, atheist by faith. So tell us a little bit about your backstory, because we know that eventually you come to know the Lord, but what's your history with God?
Yeah, so I grew up in home in St. Louis, in a Jewish home. Yeah, and so my family was Jewish, all my friends were Jewish. They were all out getting bar mitzvahed. I never did. I didn't have a relationship with God. Didn't know God in any way. So I like to joke, right? I was Jewish for the culture and the food and the jokes.
Right.
That was my only connection to religion. I'd never read the Bible before up until last year.
Wow.
So to be taken with the Holy Spirit and to be saved, I still sometimes cannot believe that I'm standing here talking about my journey, because there's no way this should have. I don't know how it happened.
Yeah,
right. But it's awesome.
Yeah, God comes after us, and when we least expect it. My backstory of having a long gambling addiction, the Lord came and got me at the, after 10 years of addiction. It's just like, I wasn't really looking for him when he showed up, but nonetheless, he changed and transformed my life. That's what we're here to talk to you about, the transformation that's taken place in a little over a year since you got born again. So you have nothing to do with God, your whole life, and now here you are, and some extraordinary circumstances took place in your life that sort of led to this. So let's tell everybody the story about how you encountered something in Chicago that sort of disrupted your marriage a little bit.
Yeah, so it was the last week of February 2020, and I was in Chicago on a business trip, and God showed up in a hotel room in Chicago. I had set up an appointment to meet with a prostitute in Chicago. Went to the meeting location, took care of business, getting ready to leave, and the prostitute's partner came out of the other room. And mind you, he's probably 6'4", 6'5", 300 pounds, looks like a Chicago Bears offensive lineman.
Oh, wow.
And he comes out with his phone in his hand, and he turns it around and shows me, and it had my wife's contact information on it. And they said, you've got to pay us some more money or we're going to call your wife. Well, of course, I didn't want to die in a hotel room. That was my first instinct. I want to do whatever I can to stay alive, get out on the street where I'll be safe, and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do with my life here. So about $900 later, I actually was able to leave the room, went on with my day, went to meetings, hiding behind my mask the whole time. Nobody knew anything was wrong, and made it back to Kansas City. Then on Sunday, March 1st, 2020, about 9:30 p.m., my text messages started blowing up on me. And it was the couple from Chicago. And they said, Neil, you have 15 minutes to pay us more money, or we're going to call your wife. Well, for the next 15 minutes, I'm pacing around the room like, I'm not going to pay him any more money. I'm thinking, well, if I don't pay him, like, I'm their meal ticket here, right? So maybe they won't actually call Amy. Maybe they're bluffing. And no, 9:45, Amy's phone upstairs in the upstairs bedroom starts to ring, and it is they called and they told her what I did in Chicago, and I still remember so vividly the footsteps coming down the stairs, down the hall, and she burst into the room and says, "Are you cheating on me?" And really, that set off a wild chain of events over the next six weeks that led me to God. God hit me in the side of the head with a 2x4, but I still wasn't listening yet. And the reason I wasn't is I had been addicted to pornography and addicted to sex, and specifically paying women for sex for a good portion of my marriage. Addicted to pornography for most of my life. It was an evil sin that brought a lot of evil into my world consistently, but I didn't know how to break free from it. So even though I had this encounter being blackmailed by a prostitute, I was not ready to confess my sins yet.
Sure.
And everything that had been going on. So I did whatever I could to keep my mask on. I loved all my sins. I didn't want to do anything that would cause me to lose it. So, I told my wife, "Oh, this is the first time it ever happened. I'm not going to do it again. I promise I'll be good." And she agreed, and we'll work on things. And so again, mind you, this happened at the beginning of March. 2 weeks later, then coronavirus hits. We're locked down, so now we're stuck in the house together for 2 months, which is in the long run turns out to be a good thing. Maybe not so much initially. It's because about 6 weeks later. So again, I'm cut off from all my sins. I can't go out partying with my friends. I can't go drinking, smoking marijuana, any of that. I'm not going out to meeting any women, but those urges definitely built up over the next 6 weeks. And then finally I gave in and set up an appointment to go meet someone who I had been paying to have sex with in my hometown here in Kansas City. And so this is the second time now that God is going to hit me in the head here. Normally, if all my text messages are on my laptop, they're on my phone. I have those locked down. Amy can't get into them. She can't see the secret life that I've been leading. She can't get into there. For whatever reason, I left the house to go meet this other person, and my computer was unlocked. Yeah, that never happens. And so as soon as I left, Amy opened up my laptop, got in there, saw the text messages, then started texting them to me as I'm on my way to first meet my son for dinner and then go meet this woman. So I'm getting these text messages, and of course I'm thinking, okay, now what am I going to say? Now how am I going to keep this mask on? And my son told me it was probably the most awkward dinner we've ever had together, just because I was completely preoccupied with the story I was going to tell. And made it back home that evening. Obviously, Amy wasn't happy. She really wasn't buying the story that I was telling her. But, we went to bed that night. But before we did, Amy told me, she's like, the only chance that you have to save this marriage is to pray to God and ask for help. Well, I'd never prayed before. And so the next morning I woke up. Amy had left the house without telling me. So I'm laying in bed alone. And I was like, well, now might be a good time to actually ask God for help. And so I did. And I prayed to God, and I said, I'm trapped. I have nowhere else to turn to. You're my only hope. If you're out there, give me a sign, let me know that there is help out there. And as soon as I finished that prayer, the garage door popped open, and it was Amy. Didn't know it at the time, but Amy's really the key here to this whole entire redemption story, and I'll get to that here in just a second. So she comes home. I told her I prayed. I want to work on things. Again, she's kind of hesitant, but agrees to, we'll continue to talk and try to get these issues addressed. So then about 2 hours later, here's the third and final time God decides to say, Neil, I'm trying to get your attention. You better start listening to me. Amy, we're sitting on the couch. Amy gets a random Facebook message from some guy we didn't know. And all the message said was, do you know Neil Getzlow? I don't know what it was or what, I'm not sure what triggered it, but at that exact moment, I felt absolutely compelled to confess every single one of my sins to Amy and to God and to get it off my chest. And that's what I did, and as I threw up all over the floor of our marriage, basically told her about my pornography addiction, my sex addiction, and then she changed my life. And Jesus changed my life in an instant, because after I just confessed these incredibly horrible and evil sins and all the evil I brought in to our world, she looks at me and she's like, Neil, she's like, Jesus forgave me for my sins. How can I not forgive you for your sins? Neil, I forgive you. And it was the greatest gift that I've ever gotten. From that moment, the addiction was gone. I have not looked at pornography. I've not been tempted to stray on my marriage. All of that, absolutely gone. I'll say, that was the easy part, actually, was walking away from those addictions. I know for some people it's hard and there is a struggle. But God gave me a way to walk away from those. Now the hard part was trying to rebuild my marriage. Yeah. But we're able to do that by finally putting God at the center of our relationship.
A lot to unpack in your story here, Neil. Let me try my best, because I want to get to the heart of a couple things I heard you say, and because one, I know as a former addict myself of different things, I got good at lying, and it sounds like you had your own skills in this area, and so obviously you've been caught, and you're doing your best to sort of reserve the damage from getting any worse if you reveal everything, and so you're trying to walk through that. And so I'm curious, just initially, as you mentioned that you decided to pray to God that morning, was this just something in your head that you were just like, well, I'm just going to do this thing that my wife wants me to do, so maybe that'll make things better, or did you really have an intention of your heart to see something change?
Yeah, so I think that since that hotel incident in Chicago, and then over the next 6 weeks, I really was more sorry that I got caught than being sorry about the things I was doing, right, than hurting Amy and that kind of thing. I was, again, trying to figure out, how can I keep this mask on, this entire facade of a life, all these lies, how do I keep it straight? And so, yeah, but I was serious with my prayer. I'll say that. Did I expect it to do what it did in my life? No, absolutely not. But at that point, and that was one of the things I remember Amy telling me. She's like, what have you got to lose? If I'm right, there is a God and he can save you from your sins, then you are in great shape. And she's like, if I'm wrong, well, then what do you have to lose? And so that was kind of my attitude, okay, I'm going to try it. I don't expect anything, but let's see what happens.
Yeah. Let's ask the question that might be on the minds of someone listening to your story right now. So you've mentioned your wife sort of easily. It sounds easy. I'm sure it wasn't, but it sounds like she quickly, I'll use that word, quickly was able to forgive you because she knew what Jesus had done for her. When you talk about a marriage, though, you don't often hear a story, as we've already previously mentioned. You're atheist by faith, and you have this woman you're married to, and she apparently is a Christian, is the way you're describing. So how has the relationship with her and Jesus been a factor for you in the time you've been married?
Yeah, so we got married back in 2012. About 3 months after we got married, Amy got saved, and I did not see it coming. We had been, as we were dating and in a relationship, we were out partying and having a good time, enjoying all the culture, all the sins of the world together. It was awesome. And that's why we clicked. We enjoyed it. And then she got saved and it changed everything. And I did what any good Christian or good atheist would do when faced with a Christian. I persecuted her, right? I mocked
Wow.
her. I thought she was crazy. I went and told my friends, you're not going to believe what my wife has done. And what I try. And so at that point, right, when this all went down, like my sins were pretty much under control, those addictions. I was still looking at pornography, but I was not tempted to go out and pay for prostitutes. When that happened, when Amy got saved again, I rebelled. And that just opened up. And this goes back to my childhood, and we can get into that here in a second, this whole shame cycle that I had. When that happened, it just fed the need that, I'm not worthy of love, I'm not worthy of attention, fed all those bad addictions. So, what I realized, like, I blamed Amy, right? Instead of taking accountability for myself, I blamed Amy and went and acted out in ways that are unimaginable. So basically that's, for the next, 6 years or so. I mean, that's what we were dealing with. Just to, when you have a believer and a non-believer together, it's tough. And
Well, you said you read the whole Bible, so I'm sure you've read parts about being unequally yoked and how that can tear people apart. And so that's what you're just experiencing in practical terms when we talk about seeing the Bible. And it's like the Bible doesn't apply to our lives. Well, the practices of the Bible, they work whether you believe in the Bible or not. And so you were doing these things, and it sort of made you stray. And I imagine that was part of the cause of you guys fracturing a little bit and you doing some of these sin issues, even though you would have never called them sin issues at the time. That is Christianese that you've learned since you've been born again. That is...
Yeah. No, this wasn't a sin. This was just me being a human being, right? And I was enjoying all of it, right? Going out and getting drunk all the time and driving impaired, which is horrible. Like, just every sin you could possibly embrace. I didn't just take part in it. I celebrated it. And, but what happened, oftentimes though, I'd go out with my friends to watch a ball game. I'd leave Amy home alone. And I left Amy home alone probably more than, like, you should never do that, right, to your spouse. But I mean, I don't know, sometimes I don't know how to describe it other than calling it abuse, right? It is mental abuse. There's no doubt about it. Like, and that's why it's, and I will say, Amy and our marriage is better than ever right now. It really is. It's stronger than ever. But at the beginning, so after I had confessed all my sins, taken off my mask, it was hard to put those pieces back together.
Sure.
Without question. Amy became a detective. She wanted to know every single detail she wanted to know how she was deceived for so long. So what did you do? Who did you meet? Let me see your phone. Like, and I, of course, right? Like, I gave her the passwords to everything. She had automatic instant access to my phone. So probably after this first happened, I would say she was looking at my phone, 2 or 3 times a day. And then over the course of the year, it's probably down to maybe one or maybe once or twice a month. So she's getting better in handling it. But I'll say it's obviously I've created a lot of hurt. There's no doubt about that. And the path to healing is, I needed to take accountability. I had to stop pointing fingers and blaming other people for my actions and take accountability myself. I had to come to Amy with a repentant heart, and I had to remove all the trash in my life and replace it with God. Yeah. And I would say that, I know for 2020, for a lot of people, was probably a year they'd like to forget. With coronavirus, for me, it was the greatest year of my life. My pastor at a sermon last summer said, coronavirus is a way for God to shake things up and prune all the things in your life that you don't need. So pay attention and take advantage of this opportunity. Yeah. And that's what I did.
Yeah, it's interesting that you pruned this out of your life. You described it as sort of a instant deliverance from pornography and sex addiction with these prostitutes. But I think even more than that, we see in our lives when we have a testimony of having something that's been delivered in our lives. We might just stop there, but for you to get to a point where you're sharing your testimony so openly and having the faith and confidence to talk about how much you love Jesus, there has to be a point on from that first initial moment where you find yourself delivered, where you say, okay, now I'm going to press into a relationship with Jesus because if he's delivered me, I want to know who he is, and I assume that's what happened for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, right, I grew up in a Jewish household with no connection to God whatsoever. And then, of course, for a Jew to even so last year I read the Bible front to back in about 6 months. For a Jew to go past the Old Testament into the New Testament, that's it's like it's frowned upon. We're not supposed to do that. We don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah, right? And so, but imagine my surprise when I open up Matthew and start reading, and it is a book full of Jews talking, and Jesus is talking about saving the Jews, like to the Jews first. And I mean, it's like a light bulb went on, like, oh, wow, I can't believe it, and it just, and so that, like I said, the biggest thing that I had to do was put God at the center of everything that I do. And that's what I've done. And I don't have space in my world anymore to fill it up with, overindulgence on sports, idolatry, culture, movies, that kind of thing. Amy and I, we canceled Netflix, we canceled cable TV, because those things were just evil temptations, at least for me. And again, I think those things, they were leading us away from God.
Yeah.
Quite honestly.
Well, it's evidence of your discernment, as you begin a relationship with God, where you're able to see the things that are coming in your eye and ear gate that may cause you to stumble or may lead you down a path you don't want to go on. I love the story of the grace of your wife in the midst of this. Now, we're talking about your testimony, but you've written this book, Unmasked. It's incredible that not only have you had this testimony in the last year, but you've had the forethought to say, okay, I need to get this on paper and let this be a blessing to others, because you're talking about, this is like crazy baby Christian faith. Is someone who was a baby Christian not too long ago, and I remember everybody sort of looking at me sideways when I transformed my life. I'm sure there are people in your life who are just like, Neil, where'd you go? Or like, and some of them you may not even talk to anymore because you've moved so far on a new path. But for you and your wife, I want to talk about this because I think this is something that needs to be addressed, especially in a testimony where the results of all your sin have been put on the table, but it's a journey to get to a place where you're able to have a successful marriage after that. So I want to know how Jesus was at the center of building up your marriage and any sort of practical things that happened for you two to be able to be restored in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and the title, the subtitle of the book is, Conquering Sexual Sin and Walking in Victory. But I'll say, like, it's walking, and in parentheses, you should say, and stumbling in victory, because it's not always easy. Now, again, the first thing we did is we put God at the center of our relationship, and we started praying together, and that, of course, is just so healing. We spent a lot of time on our back deck just talking. So that 2 months that we were locked down together, again, at the time thinking, I can't believe I just confessed everything to Amy and now we're stuck here together. I have no escape hatch. Yeah. But that was a blessing. Amy bought these boxes of like couples cards where you try to learn, new things about each other. And we spent weeks just going through those questions, trying to reestablish that connection, reestablish that intimacy. And, for me, I'm an introvert at heart. So, and Amy's a little bit more extrovert. She would always tell me before I was saved, like, Neil, you never talk to me. And so the one thing that I will say a big part of my success was finding a faith-based counselor that I could talk to and that Amy and I could go talk to together to help us get our thoughts straight and help us, give us some ways to heal. But he made this great observation, which was like pretty breakthrough for me. He's like, you've been lying to Amy for nearly 8 years. You were spending I was spending so much energy trying to keep all those lies stuffed inside behind my mask. I didn't have time for anything else. I didn't have time to engage in conversation with Amy in a meaningful way. didn't have time to talk to my kids in a meaningful way, with friends in a meaningful way. It was all surface level, because just slightly underneath that mask, I'm thinking, how do I keep all the stories straight? And it was exhausting. And I didn't realize it at the time, but as I look back on it now, that was all consuming. So when that burden was lifted and gone, that I can walk with with this lighter load on my shoulders. I don't have the anxiety that I suffered with. I mean, it comes, I still get it occasionally, but it's not nearly as debilitating as it used to be. Same with depression. We all have times where we're probably not feeling our best, but God has just given me a new identity and a new way of looking at life that has changed. And so, just basically, without these lies to have to keep straight, finally gave Amy and I a chance to connect and actually have real conversations. And fortunately, during these conversations, we learned we still loved each other, and there was a reason we got married in the first place. But that's
Second Corinthians 5:17 describes become a new person, and it sounds to me like you and your wife were basically becoming remarried. You were having a honeymoon period where you're getting to know the new Neil, because that's who you are now. You've been set free from some of these addictions, and I want to talk about that a little bit, because for someone tuning in who maybe has dealt with things like this for a long time, and they've had expectations of maybe they've prayed like you, Lord, help me take this away. They've got lies and masks they're hiding behind. You sort of make it sound simple, that it just sort of got taken off you and you have no temptation anymore. But you have a book here talking about conquering sexual sin, so there has to be a little bit more to it than that.
Yeah, there is. And so, like I said, my pornography addiction goes back to when I was 9 years old. That's when I was first exposed to pornography. There was behind my elementary school, there was a wooded area that had a little area carved out with some logs, and around those logs were ripped up pieces of Playboy magazines. And so that was where I was first exposed to it. And from that moment on, it grabbed hold of my life, and it didn't let go. And my parents were divorced, so I moved into an apartment with my mom. Was a latchkey kid. I'll say that's one of the things that, again, my counselor helped me understand. The first question he asked me, he's like, Neil, what was the first thing you had to learn to do as a kid that you remember? And I paused for a second because I didn't have an answer right away, but it popped into my head. I had to learn how to be alone. So when we moved into this apartment, there were no other kids around. So I'm walking back and forth to the bus stop by myself. My mom's at work 40 hours a week. So, in the summer, I am there all alone. And she had on either side of her bed these two nightstands, and they were just full of Playboy and Penthouse magazines. And so that was where the cycle started. This shame cycle of, nobody loves me. I'm not good enough to be loved. That's why I'm alone all the time. How am I going to fill up this hole in my heart? Well, I'm going to fill it up with these magazines as a preteen and a teenager, and fill it up with cable TV. And this is in the early 80s. So this is the brand new debut of cable TV and MTV, and all those sexualized images coming at you. My culture was formed right there around sex, pornography, treating women, as objects. Yeah. And so that's really how it started for me.
Yeah.
And again, it was this I had this hole in my heart that I had to fill up with something. And obviously didn't have God for most of my life, so I filled it up with the junk of the world. Today, I'm filling it up with God. I'm filling it up with Jesus. Like I said, we canceled cable, we canceled Netflix. We're now, most of the time we spent, we're watching online sermons, or we're reading the Bible together, or we just watched The Chosen. We just got caught into
Yeah.
that. Yes, right. So like it's you put out in the world what you take in. I think I was filling up with garbage, just the garbage of the culture, and I completely turned that around, and it just I don't have time for that anymore. My time is
Yeah.
devoted to God, building a relationship with Amy and our family.
I always love hearing the focus of someone who has recently been born again and really understands the value in what Christ has done for them, and they're willing to make those hard choices to change their life. You had mentioned the hole in the heart, and you've shared some of the things that you're doing to fill it now with God in Christ. I'm curious because you had mentioned going to church and doing some other things.
Yeah.
Have you found much Christian community during the pandemic where you're at? Have you been able to tap into that as opposed to what you were in before? Can you see a difference in sort of the way people are treated and act each other in sort of a different type of community?
Yeah, it's amazing. We belong to a wonderful church in Kansas City. They have been so welcoming to us. Obviously, Amy had been going for 8 years, and I've just been going for about a year now. But it's been it's unbelievable. I'll tell you this story. So this is probably June of last year, and um, again, I go back to my cell phone. I get this weird phone call from a number I don't recognize. So I let it go to voicemail, and still that fear in the back of my head. So I go to listen to the voicemail, and it's from an outreach member of our church. And he's like, and he's actually calling for Amy. He thought it was Amy's phone. It was my phone. But he called and was like, hey, it's Dane from church. Just want to make sure you're doing okay during the pandemic. Make sure you're healthy. Make sure you have everything that you need. And like, I was blown away. Like, that was the first time I've experienced that sort of love and caring, just out of the blue. And so I immediately, called him back, and it was just, like, it was just 1,000 miles an hour, just, and told him my testimony, like, right there, which I'm sure probably whoa, slow down there. But
Yeah.
like I said, a lot of people at our church know our story, our testimony. They've been so supportive. We've been so blessed, and we got part in this weekly Bible study group through the church. I just, you mentioned, friendships, and for better, for worse, unfortunately, I have lost some friends or people that I no longer talk to because of the changes that have taken place in me. But I know one of the things that you need to do as a follower of Christ is to be with other members of the kingdom, and celebrate together, and give each other comfort and encouragement. And it's that's been life changing as well. Like that was another key piece, was just being blessed enough to be part of a church community that was so supportive.
Yeah, and we have here on the screen, this is your website, and you talked about sharing your testimony. The passion that you have, obviously, that you're here sharing on our show, is uncommon generally for most people. They aren't so excited to share the dirt in their lives, unless they're sort of further removed from it a little bit. Maybe you get some of those people, but so I'm really excited. You've got this website over here. You're trying to encourage people who might be dealing with either similar things that you went through, or just to encourage people to stop hiding behind the sin that they're hiding behind. So I want to encourage people to head over to your website. We're going to have a link in the description. Is there any sort of encouragement you would like to leave our listeners with before we take off today?
Yeah, a couple things. One, and this is to all the men out there. I just say, it's time that the culture is begging for us to take accountability for what we look at, how we talk, what we put into our minds, what we put into our heart. It's time we take accountability, put God at the center of our lives, stop pointing the finger of blame at others, and repent our sins. Like this is time for us to do this. It's time for us to lead this culture, because it's gone astray. And I'd say for people out there, husbands and wives who are dealing with sins of a spouse, and it seems hopeless, I'll just say it's not. There is hope. There is a way out, and it starts with God. In Amy's case, she persistently prayed for 8 years for me. 8 years she prayed for me and my salvation. And I just encourage you, like if you're praying on someone and God isn't moving yet, keep praying. And that's something that I'm learning myself is in my prayer life. Just keep praying, keep giving glory to God. I like to say that, like, this isn't my story, this isn't Amy's story, this is God's story.
Yeah.
And he was gracious enough to save me and to give me the ability to write. And so you're right. Nobody wants to tell the worst parts of your life to the entire world. I laugh at myself sometimes too. Like, what am I doing here? But I'm convicted. Like, it's what I'm called to do is to glorify God and to let people know that you can turn your life around, because believe me, if I can do it, me, a Jewish atheist, biggest sinner in the world, if I can turn my life around, you can do the same thing.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the stories that I heard many times that you know that men didn't write the Bible because they wouldn't have left all the bad stuff in that they did. You know, the David stories and things like that. And so anytime I hear somebody sharing their garbage, I was like, oh, God must have really got a hold of them, because we don't like to share our garbage with the world. We like to hide that behind closed doors. I'm also very encouraged by the faith and persistence of your wife. And I love that God gave her grace to pray, not just pray for you, but pray while she was being persecuted by her husband, and while she was walking out her own brand new salvation. And that must have been a challenging road for her. So God bless that woman, and may she be restored in a way that glory, and get all the honor and glory goes to God for what she had to go through for that.
Well, and that when she looked at me and said, "I forgive you," you know what that was? I look back on it now. That was not only Amy saying that. That was Jesus working his will through her to forgive me. And she's like, without her, if she doesn't forgive me, this story is probably a lot different. I'm probably, I don't know where I'm at, but I can guarantee you I'm not here. I'm not telling my story, and I'm probably in a really bad place.
Yeah.
And
well, thank God that you stuck with it, and that she was with Jesus, and so nothing is impossible with God. So when someone looks from the outside and they say, well, he was stepping out on her, he was getting prostitutes, she should have left the second she heard about that. Well, everybody has a different walk with the Lord that they have to walk, and they have to be accountable for in the end of their life. So it's not the Bible says we're not supposed to be judging these stories, but they can encourage us. The Bible says that your testimony helps us to overcome. And so we appreciate you sharing it with us today to help encourage those of us who need to hear it, that we can be overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the power of our testimony. So thanks, Neil, for sharing it with us today.
Yeah, thank you. And again, I'm just so appreciative of the time and chance to share our testimony, and hopefully it helps someone out there tonight.
Amazing testimony. I love people who are so fervent and on fire for God. Neil is certainly that. When you get born again and you really have a life-altering moment, a 180 event where you were one person and you're now another, I love the people who get on a rocket ship for Christ and they're like going a mile a second, it seems like, and he had the Bible on the shelf behind him. He's joined the groups at church. He's wrote a book about his testimony. He's dropped his old friends. He's doing all these things that show, and he's like learning to get to love his wife. He's like asking her daily questions. They're having connections, things that he was not doing when he was of the world. And these are all just milestone evidence of God really having a transformative experience, a salvation moment brought on by his faith and acceptance of Jesus Christ as Lord. Remember, he said he stopped the Bible at the end of the Old Testament, and he didn't even believe in that Old Testament, but it was sort of sacrilegious, to use a term. I don't know if that's correct or incorrectly, but nonetheless, to use that term, you don't talk about Jesus when you're a Jew. It doesn't fit, but it fit for Neil when the time was right to lay down his sins at the cross, find forgiveness, find hope in Jesus. And man, what a powerful testimony, both him and his wife being set free from a number of different things, but ultimately they kept their eyes focused on Jesus, and Jesus was able to restore and bring reconciliation to their marriage, and we hope they have a continued blessed marriage and that things continue for them to be a growing testimony of God's goodness in their lives. I pray this testimony has been a blessing to you. If it has, please join us on our website, testimonyhouse.org. You can become a partner with our ministry as we begin to continue to make Christian videos all year long on our YouTube page. We make testimonial videos. We make shows about The Chosen. Neil mentioned The Chosen. We have shirts and collectibles over on our website too, so you can be a part of the ministry simply by doing that. Or if you don't want to spend any money, just subscribe to our newsletter and get links to all of our new videos when they come out. All of this helps us continue to make the content that we're making. And don't forget, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button on the Testimony House page. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live, because we do a bunch of live streams too. So there's a lot going on here at the ministry. I appreciate you watching this episode. I will see you again soon. Until next time, guys, I pray you discover a future and a hope for your life today.
We ain't trying to blend in. If you're ready, come on with us, my friends. Come on. We can change the world. Hey, we can change the world. Let's go.
What changes the world? The only thing that ever really changes the world is when somebody gets the idea that love can abound and can be shared.